Hello, Vape Village, and welcome to this special edition of our podcast where we are profiling some of the sessions available to you for the 2020 online Vape State Conference. So today I've got Luke Francis here, who's really one of our English language go-to experts at Vape. And Luke is running two workshops, a stream of workshops called Glamorous Grammar, which I did have to practice a few times before we started this session today. It's separated into two, this stream. The first session is Glamorous Grammar, from words to clauses. What's that session all about?
So that's really focusing on more the mechanics of sort of how things fit together. I know that I was certainly, when I was a high school student, I was part of the osmosis generation where grammar was not taught explicitly sort of in the English classes. Yep. So it was really when I studied Italian at school, and then when I went to uni and did linguistics and Latin and sort of my other studies that really strengthened my understanding of sort of syntax. And then, of course, when I got back into sort of teaching in schools, there was sort of this renewed interest in grammar and more explicit grammar teaching. And so I was in a really fortunate position where I'd had 3 years of real quite intensive study of grammar to be able to bring back and share and work with my students. And I mean, this sort of content that I'm covering is the type of thing that I've worked with individual schools with, or sometimes it's just been individual teachers that have sort of had a chat with me at a VAPE conference, or sort of reached out through the VAPE network, and sometimes I just sit down with them and sort of go through some of this sort of stuff. So it's aims to be sort of as helpful as possible. There'll be quite high elements of technicality sort of in the first one, and that's really so that the participants walk away with a firm understanding and good confidence about the way that English syntax works.
I certainly know that I was ahead of English at the time that the Australian curriculum first came in, and that sort of re-emphasis, as you're saying, on that explicit instruction, which we also see now, obviously, in the Victorian curriculum.
Yep.
I too was part of the osmosis generation, and I know for myself and a lot of teachers that I was working with at the time, there was a lot of fear around that. So I think a session like this is so important to really build our confidence and our explicit understanding of some of these concepts, which, as you say, for many of us really in the teaching workforce was not something we ever were taught explicitly at school.
Yeah, and being osmosis generation, it's something where as native speakers we can look at a sentence and say that doesn't work, but it's not always having the technical language to describe why it's not working.
Absolutely. And I think, English teachers, we read a lot, we're highly literate people, but yeah, as you say, we don't necessarily have the meta language to then be able to speak with our students about, what might not be working in their use of language. So that session then will flow into a second session, which is looking at the transition from clauses to the classroom. What's that second session all about?
Yeah, so the second session is looking more at application of this sort of syntax and in particular things like clauses, because that comes up quite a bit in the Victorian curriculum, and how we would work with the text in terms of sort of pulling that apart. And, there's often a misconception that you need to do, a 6-week intensive grammar course as a part of every year level, but realistically, to make it interesting for the students and to make it seem like this is really just a part of the way that sort of English teaching works and the way that the learning of the English language works. We want to be building in these smaller lessons and just building and building and building. And so if you find a really good text that has some really interesting syntax in it, that, plays with its clauses, plays with its, relative and, main and subordinate clauses in a really interesting way, you want to be able to sort of take a lesson or two to really talk about that, empower the students to be able to build that into their analysis skills, and make it really as natural a part of any course as, a character study or a theme study.
Absolutely. And I think we've all probably been in situations where grammar has been what you do on Friday afternoon, perhaps period 5 or 6. Everyone has the workbook out, and that's what we're doing, which I think students and staff are like, no, what a struggle that approach to teaching grammar is. I also love the concept you're discussing here, because I think, say, in a 7 to 10 framework, it's really giving students an insight and an approach that will then apply whatever English course they take. at a senior study. I think often people think this is the domain of English language, but actually exactly what you're describing fits perfectly within the mainstream English course or the literature course as well. So I think it's really exciting to give teachers some of those approaches that you've been talking about.
Yeah, I had the great joy of working with Mary Purcell, and we team taught a year 10 English class a number of years ago now. And, she would do this amazing stuff with sort of the themes and the characters. And then I would bring in sort of elements of the grammar as to how that's supporting that. So it's not just a matter that they're using, this wonderful rich language, but how are they structuring their sentences to emphasize the type of language that they're using, and how are they using their, playing with their parts of speech and playing with elements of morphology so that the syntax makes sense, so that it's grammatically sound, or sometimes not grammatically sound, and then what's the effect of that? How is that jarring?
I think a really interesting point that you finished on there, because I was talking yesterday with Norelle Wood, who's running some of the sessions at conference on subverting genre as writers. And I think having this session that you're talking about that gives both teachers and students the understanding of what is considered correct, and then how writers may subvert some of that and what the impact of that may be, is really exciting possibility for people.
Yeah, it links really nicely to things like art, where you have to know the rules to break the rules. And English grammar, I think, is really the same. You can read a text and have an understanding of a poorly written text versus something that's where they are being really playful with the way that they're constructing their sentences, and they're being really playful with their language, and it comes across as purposeful rather than sort of falling into something beautiful by accident.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really excited for this stream at the state conference. So if people want to register, all they need to do is go to the VATE website and follow the links there to find themselves registering. They can, of course, email me at educationofficer@vate.org.au if you have any questions about the registration process. Luke's workshops will be running live on the Saturday morning, online, of course. And I think they sound like the perfect home for both people who may be underconfident about their capacities in terms of explicit instruction, but also for people who are looking to really push the way that their department and schools integrate some of this into really high quality English instruction. So a lot of entry points for people there, and I encourage everyone to jump online and sign up. Thank you so much for your time today, Luke. We really appreciate it in a very busy year.
Thank you. I hope you're looking after yourself in this wonderful pandemic 2020.